Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children, the podcast where I share the recordings of the bedtime stories I have improvised for my children over the years. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. In today's story, we return to a tale of Flip Flop and the Elysium. So those of you who are big Flip Flop fans, prepare for a story full of silliness and practical jokes. I hope you enjoy. Flip Flop was doing something new, or getting ready to do something new. He had gotten an invitation from some of his friends among the penguins to go snowboarding. Now, he had never gone snowboarding before, and he wasn't entirely sure what it was he was going to do. But he dressed warmly, and they told him to meet them at the top of the highest hill to the north of the Elysium. When he got to the top of the highest hill, there were a number of penguins around, and they had boards that sort of looked like small flat sleds with them. And
you mean like a sled?
Well, a little bit like a sled, a little bit like, they look a little bit like the boogie boards that you all had, except they're longer.
Longer? Than that?
So anyway, he said, "So how do you do this?" And one of the penguins showed him. She put her feet into loops on the board so that she couldn't fly off. And then she started down the hill, and she would lean to the right or the left in order to steer. And she snowboarded down the hill. She looked so graceful at it. Flip Flop said, "Hey, that looks like fun." And so he jumped onto a snowboard that they lent for him, and he put his feet into the straps, and he started down the hill, but he found that it was not nearly as easy as the penguin had made it look. The first time he leaned to the right to try to turn to the right, he leaned too far, and he fell right into the snow. And he got snow up his nose and on his whiskers, and sort of all over his tummy. The penguins did not laugh. They helped him up. They helped him back up to the top of the hill, and he tried again. He had to really sort of work at it before he got good at it. He fell 5 or 6 times before he finally got down the hill all the way once, but it was still a lot of fun. And pretty soon, he was snowboarding down the whole hill with not much effort. It was starting to get late in the evening, and so the penguins told Flip Flop that it was time for them to go hunting for their fish for the night, and that they needed to go. And he said, okay, and he asked if he could borrow the snowboard and go a few more times, and that he would give it back to them next time they saw him. And they said, sure. So he jumped on the snowboard, and he snowboarded down the hill, and he was really getting pretty good. He could snowboard back and forth and make sort of long turns without falling. As he was trudging back up to the top of the hill, he looked up to the top, and there, silhouetted against the setting sun, he saw the shape of a penguin. He walked up the top of the hill, and when he was 5 or 6 paces away from the penguin, he called out. He said, "Hey, what's going on? Did you forget something?" And the penguin didn't say anything back. And he got even closer. He was about 3 paces away when he realized he could just see enough in the left side of the setting sun to realize that it wasn't a penguin. It was a penguin. He was so startled, he jumped on the snowboard, and he went backwards down the hill, and he was frantically trying to keep his balance, so he was weaving back and forth like he was dizzy. And the penguin jumped into the air and flew down the hill after him. When he got to the bottom, the penguin was already there waiting for him. Flip Flop did not have his water gun with him, but he still had his claws, and he put his claws out and he got ready for a battle, but the penguin didn't do anything. And Flip Flop said, "Do you want something?" And then the penguin spoke. It said, "My name is Centaur, and I wish to ask asylum." "Asylum?" said Flip Flop. "Asylum from what?"
What's asylum?
Asylum is where, for instance, if in your country people are trying to hurt you, you can go to another country and you can ask asylum, which means you come live in their country where you'll be safe. So Flip-Flop said, asylum from what? Sindar said, I have broken with my kind. I no longer wish to serve the frost fairies, and so now they hunt me down, because they have no place for a sanguine that does not serve. I wish to ask asylum of the cats. Flip-Flop said, oh. He didn't really know what to do. This was entirely new. He had never heard a sanguine speak before. He had had no idea that they could speak. And he had never even considered what he would do if one asked for asylum. But after thinking about it for a minute, he thought, what's the worst that can happen? One sanguine by itself really isn't that dangerous with the cat guards we have in the Elysium. So even if it's lying, it doesn't hurt anything to grant asylum. He said, I tell you what, I can't give you permanent asylum. Only King Flibbertigibbet can do that. But I will grant you temporary asylum in the Elysium. And tomorrow we can travel to see Flibbertigibbet and see what sort of arrangements we can make. Sindar sort of made a curious little sort of head bob that must be the sanguine equivalent of a bow and said, I thank you. Flip-Flop. Flip-Flop said, can you come into the Elysium where it's warm? I can, said Sindar. Your warmer temperatures are not comfortable for me, but they are not dangerous to me. Very well, said Flip-Flop. Follow me. He picked up his snowboard, and with it tucked under one paw, he began to walk back towards the Elysium, with Sindar walking close beside him. They were most of the way back to the Elysium when Sindar suddenly stopped moving. Flip-Flop turned to look at him. He said, what's wrong? Sindar began to shake a little bit and said, they're coming. Flip-Flop didn't really even need to ask who was coming. He just broke into a run. Sindar launched himself into the air and flew next to Flip-Flop. Flip-Flop looked back over his shoulder, and sure enough, over one of the closest hills came 5 sanguines flying in formation straight towards them. Flip-Flop began to run faster, and then he reached up, grabbed Sindar out of the air, and belly flopped down onto the snowboard as they tobogganed down the last little bit of the slope, and then flew headfirst off of the snowboard as they catapulted into the warm, green air of the Elysium. The sanguines that pursued them screeched in frustration as they turned away, unwilling to brave the defensive magic of the Elysium. Flip-Flop turned, bared his teeth, and growled at them. And then, for good measure, he reached back, squeezed his own tail, and at them. He reached down, picked up his snowboard, and said, come on, Sindar, we'll find you some place to stay. He introduced Sindar to the cat guards and assigned 2 of them to watch over him. He said, I will contact my cousin and request an audience for you with him at the palace.
Who's cousin?
I'm sorry, his uncle. So, and his uncle's Flibbertigibbet. I request an audience at the palace.
Uncle?
Yeah, Flip-Flop is Flibbertigibbet's nephew, so that makes Flibbertigibbet his uncle. Sindar again did that curious little head bob. I have to ask, though, said Flip-Flop, because I'm sure Flibbertigibbet's going to ask me, why do you need asylum? Why are you running away? Because, said Sindar, I do not enjoy serving the frost fairies. All they do is give us evil things to do. I no longer want to do things for them. I wish to do things of my own. Evil things? Said Flip-Flop. I don't know, said Sindar. I don't know any other things to do, but I would like to learn what other things there are to do in life, besides inflict pain and sorrow and fear. Said Flip-Flop. Well, I can show you something you can do. Come here. He invited Sindar into his room. He said, here. He gave Sindar a whoopee cushion. He said, go into your quarters and sit on this. It's funny. Funny, said Sindar. What is funny? Try it, said Flip-Flop. You'll see. Very well, said Sindar. Then Flip-Flop sat down to write a letter to Flippity-Gibbet to send along the Cat's Paw Highway. He spent several hours writing the letter, trying to explain the situation and how this Penguin seemed somehow different than the others. Then he went outside, sent it along the Cat's Paw Highway, and then went to visit Sindar while he was waiting for the reply. He knocked on Sindar's room and heard a curious noise inside. He said, everything okay in there, Sindar? He heard the noise again, but nothing else. Afraid that something had happened, Flip-Flop burst through the door just in time to see Sindar dropping out of a low hover right onto the whoopee cushion with a big and then he heard a sound he had never heard ever before. As a matter of fact, it might have been a sound that no one had ever heard before. It was this sound. It was the sound of a Penguin chuckling. See, said Flip-Flop, there are things to do that aren't evil. I like this laughing, said Sindar. Do you have other things that are funny? Oh, just you wait, said Flip-Flop. Said, I tell you what, if Flippity-Gibbet agrees to give you asylum, you can stay here with me for a couple weeks. I'll teach you all my jokes. Very well, said Sindar. I will look forward to that. I sent Flippity-Gibbet a message, said Flip-Flop. I think that just then he heard a knock behind him, and one of the cat guards came in with an envelope bearing the big paw print of Flippity-Gibbet on the front. Flip-Flop ripped it open, read the letter inside, and said, yes, Flippity-Gibbet has granted you an audience tomorrow so that you may request permanent asylum. We'll have to see what happens there, and then we can make our plans. I would like to be of assistance to you, said Sindar. I would like to help you protect Sindar. I would like to help you protect the Elysium. Well, one step at a time, said Flip-Flop. Right now, just work on learning how to laugh. Very well, said Sindar. Good night, said Flip-Flop. Wait, said Sindar. Tell me, will you... No, they just have cat beds, but the Penguin just had a deal. They'd never had a Penguin visitor before. Wait, said Sindar. Must I go alone to my audience in the morning, or will you come with me? I'll come with you if you'd like, said Flip-Flop. I would like that, said Sindar. Great, said Flip-Flop. We'll plan on it in the morning. Good night, Sindar said. Good night. As Flip-Flop closed the door behind him, leaving, he heard the sound of coming from the room behind him. Shaking his head and grinning, he went back to his own room and fell quickly asleep.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but heckling and clever commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and the logo was designed by Silas Wendelin. If you know someone who might enjoy the stories, please tell them about the show. Our website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com, and preview snippets are posted to most social media. I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.